The wind crossed the open plains like a quiet warning, bending the dry grass and carrying dust from places long forgotten. She stood there with her hands drawn close to her chest, the hem of her plain dress fluttering against her boots, her breath shallow as if the land itself had stolen it from her. She had crossed rivers and trails to reach this place, yet nothing in her journey had prepared her for the stillness of this moment. When she spoke, her voice barely rose above the wind. She trembled and whispered that this was her first time, and the words carried more fear than the cold ever could. The rancher did not rush her. He stood a step away, broad-shouldered and quiet, his hat pulled low to keep the sun from his eyes. He had lived his whole life on the frontier, shaped by long days and longer nights, by loss that came without warning and hope that arrived just as quietly. He answered softly, not as a man used to command, but as one who understood how fragile a moment could be. He told her she was safe here, that the plains had room for those brave enough to stand their ground. She had not always been brave. The old west town she came from was little more than a scatter of wooden buildings and tired souls clinging to survival. After her husband's passing, the place had grown colder, though the seasons never changed. People spoke kindly enough, but kindness did not fill an empty bed or quiet the long nights. She worked where she could, mended what she could, and learned how to walk without leaning on anyone. Still, loneliness followed her like a shadow along the forgotten trails. The ranch lay far from town, surrounded by open land and silence. A single windmill turned slowly in the distance, its steady creak a reminder that life here moved at its own pace. Horses grazed nearby, their calm presence grounding her as she stood uncertain in the grass. She had never lived this way, never trusted a place so open it felt like the sky might swallow her whole. Frontier life demanded more than strength. It demanded faith. The rancher watched her closely, not with hunger or haste, but with care earned through years of hardship. He had seen fear before in storms that tore roofs from homes, in cattle scattered by lightning, in the eyes of people who came west believing promises that could not be kept. He had learned that survival was not only about endurance, but about choosing when to reach out a hand. She had heard stories of men like him, cowboys hardened by the land, distant and unyielding. Yet there was nothing sharp in his voice now. He spoke of the plains as if they were alive, of the way the land tested those who walked it and rewarded those who listened. He told her she did not need to prove anything, not to him, not to the land. This place, he said, could be a beginning. A small bundle lay near her feet, all she owned tied with careful knots. Inside were letters never answered, a faded photograph, and a token given by an elder woman of a nearby Native American camp. That woman had spoken of balance, of listening to the earth and to one's own heart. She had said that Western survival was not only about fighting the world, but about knowing when to let it carry you forward. Children's laughter drifted faintly from the bunkhouse, where two young ones played under the watchful eye of an older woman who helped on the ranch. The sound startled her, then softened something inside. Life existed here, not just work and solitude. The presence of children made the land feel less empty, less unforgiving. It reminded her that the Wild West love story she had never believed in might still find room to breathe. She shifted her weight, unsure whether to step forward or turn back. Every path she had walked before had taught her caution. Trust came at a cost, and she had paid dearly once already. The rancher sensed the battle playing out behind her eyes. He did not close the distance between them. Instead, he spoke again, steady and calm, telling her that whatever choice she made would be her own. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the grass. The open plains glowed with a quiet beauty that made the moment feel suspended in time. She realized that fear and longing often walk together, especially on the frontier where every decision carried weight. This was not about speed or force. It was about standing still long enough to hear what the heart was saying. She took a slow breath, feeling the earth firm beneath her boots. The rancher's presence no longer felt overwhelming. It felt steady, like the land itself. His words had not promised ease or certainty, only honesty. In an old west town, such promises were rare. Out here, under the wide sky, they felt almost sacred. As the wind settled and the light faded, she understood that this moment marked a crossing, not of borders or borders, but of trust. Whatever lay ahead would test them both. The plains were known for their beauty, but also for the storms that came without mercy. She looked at him once more, her heart still unsteady, knowing that the choice she made now would shape everything that followed. The rancher waited, silent and patient, as the land held its breath with them. The rancher did not move until she did. His stillness was not a test, but a gift. When she finally bent and lifted her bundle, the cloth pulled tight around her few belongings. She felt the weight of it in her arms like a life she could not set down. She looked toward the bunkhouse where the children's laughter had faded into a hush, and then she glanced at the main house, small against the wide sky. The land around them seemed to watch, as if the plains could judge whether a woman belonged. He tipped his head toward the house. "Sun'll be gone soon," he said. "You can rest before night takes the cold." His voice stayed low, as if he feared loud words might scare her off the earth itself. She followed a few steps behind him, careful not to let her boots drag through the grass like someone already tired. Her hands shook, though she pressed them tight around the bundle to hide it. Every part of her wanted to be strong, the way she had learned to be strong in the old West town. But the truth was she felt young again in the worst way, like a girl stepping onto a stage with no lines to speak. Near the porch, the older woman appeared, wiping her hands on her apron. Her hair was streaked with gray and pinned back hard, but her eyes were not unkind. She looked at the newcomer from head to toe, taking in the road dust, the small bundle, the stiff posture of someone who had traveled with worry as her companion. "Name?" the woman asked, plain as a hammer. The traveler hesitated. Names carried stories. In the town she came from, her name had been spoken with pity and sometimes with suspicion, as if grief itself made a person unsteady. "Leora," she said at last. The older woman nodded once. "I'm Mabel. Supper's near." "Wash up?" She did not offer warm welcome or cold rejection. She offered work and routine, the oldest kind of mercy on the frontier. Inside, the ranch house smelled of coffee grounds and worn pine boards. A stove sat black in the corner, and the table bore knife marks from years of meals eaten in silence or hurry. Leora set her bundle down by the wall and stood unsure what to do with her hands. She did not want to touch anything as if she might break it. The rancher, Harlan, hung his hat on a peg and rolled his shoulders as though he carried the sky there. His movements were slow, careful, as if he had learned the hard way that quickness led to accidents. He poured water into a basin and slid it toward her. "Go on," he said. "It's just dust and road. Don't let it stay on you." She washed, watching the muddy water cloud and swirl, and in that small motion she felt time shift. It had been a long while since anyone had spoken to her with care that asked for nothing in return. The thought made her uneasy. The West did not give without taking, not in her experience. Mabel placed a plate on the table, then another smaller one. Leora's eyes lifted at that. "Children," Mabel said, answering without being asked. "They'll be in soon." Leora's throat tightened. Children had once been part of her life, not in the way a mother holds, but in the way an aunt might, helping neighbors, braiding hair, wiping faces, soothing fevers when parents could not miss work. She had always liked the way children lived fully in each moment, even when the world around them was harsh. On the forgotten trails, she had seen too many little graves, too many tiny crosses outside camps and towns, and the sight had lodged in her like a thorn. The door banged open and two children slipped in, breathless from running. A boy with sun-browned hair and a girl with dark braids paused when they saw Leora. Their eyes went wide, curiosity bright and sharp. The girl held a rag doll with missing stuffing at the seam. Harlan's face changed in a way that was small but clear. His shoulders softened. "This is Leora," he said, the words careful, as if he hoped they would be received gently. "She be staying a spell?" The boy, likely older by a year or two, studied her as if she might vanish. "Like the last one?" he asked, blunt in the way only children could be. Mabel's spoon clinked against the pot. Harlan's jaw tightened, then released. "No," he said, but it was not a promise, just a wish. Leora felt heat creep up her neck. She did not ask what the boy meant. She could feel the answer in the room, a shadow shaped like a woman who had come before and left. She sat at the table as quietly as she could, aware of every breath. The children slid into their chairs, still watching her. They ate in a hush broken only by simple words. Harland asked the boy about a fence post, asked the girl about her reading. The children answered, but their eyes kept drifting to Leora. She could not blame them. A stranger meant change, and change could mean danger or disappointment. After supper, Harland stepped outside to check the horses. The wind had picked up again, carrying the scent of dry grass and distant rain that might never come. Leora stood on the porch, not ready to enter the room Mabel had pointed out, not ready to claim any space as hers. Harland leaned against a post, looking out across the land as if he were reading something written in the light. "You don't have to stand out there," he said. Night air turned sharp. "I've stood in sharper," she answered before she could stop herself. He glanced at her then, not judging, just noticing. "Town life can cut a person too," he said. That simple truth pulled something loose in her chest. She stared out at the windmill turning slow as a clock. "Town was small," she said. "Small enough that everyone knew my grief like it was their own business." Harland did not press her, but he did not retreat either. "People talk," he said. "They talk to feel like they've got power over what scares them." "What scares them?" Leora asked, though she knew. "Loneliness," he said, "and ruin. And the idea that hard work don't always save you." Her fingers tightened around the porch rail. The words hit close. She had worked hard. She had been faithful. She had loved her husband the way a woman loves a man when the world around them offers little comfort. Still, sickness had come and taken him, leaving her with debts and whispers. The preacher had said God had a plan. The storekeeper had wanted his money anyway. She had sold what she could, then taken the last trail out with her bundle and the faint rumor of a ranch needing help. She had not come for romance or rescue. She had come because survival sometimes meant stepping into the unknown. Harland's gaze stayed on the horizon. "You asked me earlier," he said quietly, "if you'd be safe. I can't promise the West won't try to break you. It tries to break everyone. But I can promise I won't." The words should have soothed her. Instead, they made her wary. Promises were easy in calm weather. The true measure came when storms arrived. She thought of the native elder woman, the one who had given her the token. That woman's camp had been set back from the main trail, guarded by watchers who moved quiet as deer. Leora had stopped there when her horse went lame. The elder had listened to her story without flinching, then told her that broken promises left echoes. She had said some men carried their own echoes like chains, and some women learned to wear their scars like armor. Leora looked at Harland now and wondered what echoes he carried. The way the boy had asked about the last one had not been nothing. There had been another woman, another chance, another leaving. She turned her eyes toward the barn in the distance, half hidden by the slope of land. "You've lost family," she said, not as a question. Harland's breath came slow. "Lost," he repeated, as if the word tasted bitter. "Yes." He did not explain, but she saw it in his face. The deep set of his eyes, the way he kept his grief tucked behind his ribs like a knife. People on the frontier learned to hide pain because there was always work to be done, always another day to survive. From somewhere far off, a coyote called. The sound rose and fell like a lonely song. The children's voices drifted faintly through the window, Mabel speaking firm, steering them toward bed. Harland stayed outside as if he did not want to walk into the house and remember what it felt like to be a man with a full family. Leora's heart beat heavy. She was not the only one standing on a threshold. Harland lived on one too, between what he had lost and what he could not yet name. A faint movement caught her eye near the fence line, far enough away to be uncertain. A shape, then another, like shadows leaning against the horizon. Her breath caught. She blinked, and the shape seemed to melt into the grass. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was the last light playing tricks. Still, the back of her neck prickled. Harland followed her gaze. His body shifted, subtle but ready, the way a man shifted when he had spent years listening for danger. "You see something?" he asked. "I don't know," she said, honest. "Just felt watched." He nodded once, and for a moment all gentleness left his face, replaced by a calm hardness that made her understand how he had kept this place standing. "The plains got eyes," he said. "Sometimes it's only the wind. Sometimes it ain't." Leora swallowed. The frontier was not only lonely. It was full of quiet threats, men who drifted through like smoke, hungry for what they could take. She had heard stories on the trail, whispers of rustlers and drifters who did not fear law because law was too far away. Harlan's voice softened again, but his stance stayed firm. "Go on inside," he said. "Get some rest. We'll talk more tomorrow." She hesitated, not wanting to appear weak, not wanting to step away and leave him alone with the dark. Yet she also understood that her presence would not help if trouble came. She nodded and stepped toward the door, then paused. "Harlan," she said, speaking his name for the first time. He looked at her. "If I stay," she said, choosing each word, "I won't be easy about it. I won't trust quick." A faint, tired smile touched his mouth. "Good," he said. "Neither do I." She went inside, the wooden floor creaking under her boots, and Mabel pointed her toward a small room with a narrow bed. The quilt smelled of sun and cedar. Leora sat on the edge of the mattress, her hands still shaking slightly. Outside, the wind rose again. Somewhere beyond the fence line, the land held its secrets close, and she could not shake the feeling that the ranch was not as alone as it looked. When she finally lay back and stared at the ceiling, she listened to the night sounds, the distant stamp of a horse, the soft creak of the windmill, the far-off cry of another coyote. And beneath it all, something else, a faint rhythm like footsteps on dry grass that did not belong to the wind. Morning came pale and steady, spilling light through the small window like watered milk. Leora woke before the household stirred, her eyes opening to the plain ceiling and the faint creak of wood settling. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then the memory returned with the weight of her bundle, the wide sky, the rancher's quiet voice, and the feeling of being watched. She sat up slowly, listening. The ranch was not silent in the morning, it breathed. A horse snorted outside, a rooster called from somewhere near the coop, and the windmill turned with that same patient groan. Yet underneath those sounds she heard something else, a low murmur of men's voices, far enough away that the words did not carry, close enough to tighten her stomach. She dressed quickly in the dim light, pulling her hair back and smoothing her skirt as if neatness could keep danger away. When she stepped into the kitchen, Mabel was already at the stove, ladling coffee into tin cups. "You hear it too?" Leora asked softly. Mabel's eyes flicked toward the window. "I hear most things," she said. "Sit, eat." She set down a plate with biscuits and a smear of gravy. "Harlan's out." Leora sat but did not eat. "Who's talking out there?" Mabel's mouth pressed thin. "Depends who you ask. Could be a neighbor. Could be a man passing through." She paused, then added, "Could be trouble? It tends to ride in like it owns the road." Before Leora could answer, the boy appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. The girl followed, braids loose and pillow-marked. They climbed into their chairs and stared at Leora in the clear, blunt way children had. The boy spoke around a yawn. "You staying for good?" Leora's throat tightened. She glanced at Mabel, but the older woman did not rescue her. On the frontier, even children learned early that nothing stayed for certain. "I don't know," Leora said. "I'm staying for now." The girl studied her hands, then asked, "Are you like family?" The question landed hard. Leora's fingers curled around her cup. She remembered a time she had thought she would have a family of her own, a home with laughter in it. She remembered how quickly that picture had been taken away. "I'm just here to help," she said gently. The boy's face pinched as if he were trying to hold himself together. "Last one said that too," Mabel snapped. "Hush." But the boy's words hung in the air anyway, filling the room with what had not been said last night. The back door opened and Harlan stepped in, his boots leaving a trace of dust on the floor. His expression was controlled, but his eyes were sharper than before. He carried his hat in his hand, and the way he held it made Leora think of a man gripping something steady to keep from being pulled apart. He looked at the children first. "Go on," he said. "Outside. Feed the hens." "Mabel'll show you." The boy hesitated, then slid off his chair. The girl followed, clutching her doll. Mabel gave Harlan a look, then took the children out, leaving Leora alone with him in the kitchen. Harlan poured himself coffee without sitting. "You heard voices?" he said, not asking. "Yes," Leora said. "Who were they?" His jaw flexed. "Two men rode up at dawn. Said they were looking for a stray mare. He paused, and Leora felt the pause like the space before a storm breaks. They weren't looking for Amare. Leora's stomach turned. What did they want? Harlan met her eyes. There was a hard honesty there, the kind that did not soften truth to make it easier. They asked about you. The words knocked the air from her lungs. About me? She whispered. Harlan nodded once. They described you. Dark hair, travel-worn dress, a small bundle. His voice lowered. They asked if you'd come through here. They acted friendly. Men like that always do? Leora stared at the table, seeing not wood but the faces of people from her old town. The way they watched a woman alone. The way they judged her for needing help. The way certain men spoke too close as if a widow was a thing to be taken. I didn't tell anyone I was coming, she said, more to herself than him. Harlan set his cup down carefully. Somebody saw you on the trail, he said. Or somebody in town talked. Or maybe those men been tracking travelers. Hard to say. A cold fear worked its way up her spine. Are they coming back? They might, Harlan said, or they might be gone already. But I don't like the way they asked. And I don't like the way they looked at the place. Leora's hands shook, and she hid them by folding them in her lap. She wanted to ask if he meant rustlers, but she already knew. Men who came asking questions at dawn did not carry good intentions. Harlan's voice softened. I should have warned you, he said. The West is wide, but it ain't empty. There are folks who think anything not nailed down belongs to them. Leora tried to swallow, but her throat felt tight. If I'm danger to this ranch, she said, I can leave. She looked at him then, truly looked, and saw the strain behind his steadiness. He had been alone too long, carrying too much. The ranch was not just land. It was his attempt to hold on to something that had once been a family. The children were proof of that. They were not his by blood, but they were under his roof, and that meant he would not let harm come near them if he could help it. What did you tell them? Leora asked. I told them no, Harlan said simply. I told them I hadn't seen anyone. I told them to ride on. His eyes darkened. They smiled like they believed me. But their eyes didn't. Leora's heart beat harder. Why would they be looking for me? Harlan hesitated. Maybe they aren't. Maybe they're looking for any woman alone, or maybe... He stopped himself, and Leora felt the words he did not say. Maybe there was something in her past she had not told him. Maybe the West had a way of dragging old trouble forward. Leora pressed her lips together. There was truth in that. She had not told Harlan everything. She had not told him about the debt note her husband had signed when he got sick. She had not told him about the man in town who claimed her husband owed him more than money, who said a widow should pay what she could not. She had not told him how she had seen that man talking to strangers a day before she left, his eyes following her like a rope. I didn't steal, she said suddenly, the words sharp with fear. I didn't run from anything dishonest. Harlan's gaze held hers. I didn't think you did, he said. But I think you're scared of something. Leora's breath caught. She wanted to deny it, but she could not. She was scared of being hunted. She was scared of bringing ruin to another place. She was scared of trusting Harlan's calm voice only to watch it break under pressure. She was scared that love could be possible, and that the West would take it away like it had taken everything else. Harlan stepped closer, slow and careful. He did not touch her. He only lowered his voice. You don't have to tell me all of it, he said. Not today. But I need to know enough to keep the ranch safe. Leora's eyes stung and she blinked hard. My husband died owing money, she said, more than we ever had. A man in town said the debt didn't die with him. Her voice shook. He said I'd pay. One way or another, Harlan's face went still, like stone. Name, he said. Leora shook her head. I don't want trouble. You already got trouble, Harlan replied, not unkind. I need the name. Leora swallowed. Caldron, she said, a traitor. He owns half the store shelves and thinks he owns the other half of the town. Harlan's eyes narrowed. I know him, he said. The words were heavy, as if they carried old bitterness. That knowledge frightened Leora more. Then you understand, she whispered. If those men were his, they'll come back. If I stay, they'll put you in the middle of it. Harlan's voice turned low. He don't get to claim people, he said. Not on my land. The firmness in his words should have steadied her, yet it also showed her the edge of him, the part shaped by loss and anger. She imagined Harlan standing against men like those, and she imagined the cost. Outside, the children's voices rose as they chased hens, and the sound reminded her what was at stake. Innocence did not last long on the frontier. It had to be protected, sometimes by men forced into hard choices. Later, Harlan took her to the yard and showed her the work he needed done. He kept her close, not in a way that felt controlling, but in a way that said he did not want her out of sight. They repaired a loose latch on the chicken coop and carried water to the trough. At times their hands brushed when they reached for the same tool, and each time it happened, a strange warmth sparked under Leora's fear, quick and bright. Once, as they lifted a bucket together, Harlan's fingers closed around the handle near hers. His hand was rough, weathered. Her own was calloused from work, yet smaller. The contact lasted only a second, but it left a mark inside her, as if her body remembered what it felt like to be held without harm. Harlan noticed, too, his breath caught, faint but real. He looked away first, as if the closeness frightened him more than men on horseback. It made Leora's chest ache. She had thought longing was something she had buried with her husband. Yet here it was, rising in the open air like a stubborn weed. That afternoon, Mabel pulled Leora aside while Harlan saddled a horse. "You heard about the last one," Mabel said, wiping her hands again as if she could scrub away memory. Leora's heart tightened. "I didn't mean to pry." Mabel's eyes hardened, then softened, like a door half-opening. "She came in spring," she said. "Said she'd stay. Said she could handle frontier life. She couldn't." Mabel's voice dropped. "Or maybe she could, but she couldn't handle Harlan's silence." Leora felt a dull ache. "Did he love her?" Mabel gave a short laugh without humor. "He don't show love easy." "Not after what happened." "What happened?" Leora asked, though she sensed the answer would be painful. Mabel's jaw tightened. "His wife died birthing a child that didn't live," she said. "He buried them both out back under a cottonwood. Then he took in those two you see running around now, because their folks didn't make it through a fever season. Harlan's got a heart, girl. It's just wrapped in hard leather." Leora's breath caught. The weight of that grief settled over her like a shawl. She looked toward the yard where Harlan stood by the horse, his back to them, the sun outlining his shoulders. She imagined him digging two graves, the soil stubborn beneath his hands, the sky too wide to offer comfort. Mabel's voice sharpened. "And now you've brought Caldron's shadow to the doorstep. If you're thinking of playing at a cowboy romance, don't. This ain't a story folks tell by the fire. This is blood and land and men who don't fear doing wrong." "I'm not playing," Leora said quietly. "I never wanted any of this." Mabel studied her, then nodded once. "Then don't run either," she said. "Running makes wolves chase harder." As evening neared, Harlan rode out to check the far fence line. Leora watched him go with a twist of fear. The sky had the bruised look of coming weather, clouds gathering slow like bad thoughts. She tried to focus on her work, but her attention kept drifting toward the horizon. When Harlan returned, his horse lathered, his face set. He dismounted without speaking at first. Then he looked at Leora and said, "They came back." Her stomach dropped. "The men?" He nodded, "Not to the house. They stayed out near the south fence, watching." His eyes were dark. "They didn't want to be seen by Mabel or the children." "They wanted me to know they're there?" Leora's hands went cold. "What do they want?" Harlan's voice was low and steady, but she heard the strain beneath it. "They want you to get scared and run," he said. "Or they want me to hand you over." Leora's breath shook. The wind picked up again, rattling the porch boards like warning bones. She looked at Harlan's face, at the grief and strength carved into it, and she felt something shift inside her that was both hope and terror. Love felt possible in the way the first green shoot feels possible after a long winter, fragile, easy to crush. Harlan stepped closer, finally lifting a hand, not to claim her, but to steady her. His fingers hovered near her shoulder, then rested there lightly as if asking permission. The warmth of his touch spread through her fear. "I won't hand you over," he whispered. Leora's eyes filled, and she hated herself for it. "You can't fight the whole West," she said. Harlan's mouth tightened. "No," he said. "But I can choose what kind of man I am on my land." Behind them, the children's laughter drifted again, unaware. The sky darkened by degrees. Somewhere out beyond the fence, unseen eyes watched the ranch as night came on, and Leora understood that whatever she and Harlan were becoming, it would be tested soon. She leaned slightly into his hand before she could stop herself. A small surrender, a small truth. Harlan's breath caught, and for a heartbeat the world narrowed to that touch, that closeness, that feeling of shelter. Then, far off, a horse whinnied sharp, frightened, and the sound snapped the moment like a rope breaking. Harlan's head turned toward the darkening plains, and Leora felt his hand tense on her shoulder. "Inside?" he said, voice tight. "Now." Leora moved fast, but her body felt slow, as if fear had turned her bones to wet wood. Harlan guided her through the door with a hand at her back, firm and careful, and then he shut it like he meant to keep the whole plains outside. Mabel looked up from the table, saw Harlan's face, and went still. The children paused mid-whisper, sensing the change the way animals sensed a storm. "What is it?" Mabel asked, though her voice already knew. Harlan did not answer right away. He crossed the room and took down a long gun from above the hearth, checking it with calm hands. The sight of it made Leora's stomach tighten, not because she craved violence, but because it meant the world had slipped into a place where words might no longer hold. He kept his movements quiet so the children would not panic, yet his eyes stayed sharp as flint. "Kids," he said, voice low, "you go to the back room with Mabel. No arguments." The boy's chin lifted, brave in the way only the young could be. "Are they here?" he asked. Mabel grabbed his arm. "Hush and move," she said. Her tone was hard, but her hands were gentle. The girl clutched her doll and stared at Leora as if asking whether this new woman had brought the night to their door. Leora wanted to say something soothing. She wanted to tell them it would be fine. The lie would have tasted bitter. She only managed a small nod as if that could give them courage. When the back door shut, Harlan turned to Leora. "You sit where I can see you," he said. "And you do what I tell you, not because you're weak. Because this is my land and I know its dangers." Leora swallowed. "Are they coming in?" Harlan's jaw tightened. "Not yet," he said. "They're waiting. They want me to step out alone." "And will you?" Leora asked, hating how her voice shook. Harlan looked at her then, and there was a kind of grief in his gaze that felt older than the ranch, older than the fences, older than the scars in his hands. "If I don't," he said, "they might come in anyway. If I do, I might lead them away from the house. Or you might not come back," Leora whispered. A silence settled between them, heavy and close. Outside, the wind raked the porch boards. Somewhere a horse shifted, uneasy. Leora could almost feel eyes in the dark, patient and hungry. Harlan stepped nearer, lowering his voice. "I need you to listen," he said. "Those men are likely tied to Caldron. He's too proud to ride out himself. But he'll send others to do his dirty work, then pretend his hands are clean." Leora's throat burned. "I never meant to bring this," she said. "I should have stayed in town." Harlan's mouth hardened. "Town would have eaten you," he said. "This land might break you too, but it won't shame you for breathing." He paused, then added, softer, "And I won't either." His words should have lifted her, but fear pushed back. She could not stop seeing herself as a storm cloud over this ranch, a danger to children who deserved peace. "I can go," she said, the thought rising like a desperate prayer. "I can ride out now. If they want me, let them follow me away from here." Harlan's eyes flashed. "No," he said, sharper than before. Then he lowered his tone, as if remembering the children behind the wall. "No, you don't ride out into dark with men hunting. That's how people disappear on forgotten trails." Leora stared at him, a tremor running through her arms. "Then what do we do?" Harlan breathed in slow. "We make choices," he said. "Hard ones." He walked to the window and looked through a small gap in the curtain. Leora followed, but he lifted a hand to stop her. "Don't show your face," he murmured. "They'll take it as proof." Leora's heart hammered as she stayed back, watching only his profile. He stood so still it scared her. She realized then that Harlan was not fearless. He had simply learned how to hold fear without letting it rule him. After a long moment, he stepped away from the window. They're at the tree line, he said. 2 for sure. Maybe a third. Leora's knees went weak. She sat as he told her, hands clasped so tight her fingers ached. She thought of Caldron's smile, the way he had spoken to her in town as if her grief was a weakness he could press. She thought of how he had said she would pay, one way or another. She had believed she could outrun him by taking the trail west. Now the past had caught up like a shadow that did not tire. Harlan moved with quiet purpose, checking the latch, placing a chair under the knob in case the door gave. Then he went to the cupboard and pulled out a small pouch. He set it on the table beside Leora. "What's that?" she asked. "Money," Harlan said. "Not much, but enough for a fast start," her breath caught. "Why are you showing me this?" Harlan's eyes held hers. "Because if things turn bad, you might have to take the children and go," he said. "Mabel knows a place to hide, a camp that owes her kindness. A Native American family north of here. They keep their own laws and they don't bow to men like Caldron," Leora's voice broke. "You're asking me to leave you." Harlan's throat worked as if words were hard. "I'm asking you to live," he said. "And I'm asking you to keep them living too." Leora's chest tightened until it hurt. She had come to this ranch believing she could survive alone. Now the idea of leaving these children, leaving Harlan, felt like tearing skin. She hated that she cared. Caring made a person easy to wound. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't take them away from you." Harlan's gaze flicked toward the back room and something softened in his face, then hardened again. "They've been taken from people before," he said. "They'll live through it again if it keeps them breathing." He paused, then spoke like a man admitting a truth he had tried to bury. "I won't live through losing them. Not again." The words struck Leora like a blow. She saw him then, truly saw him, not as a strong rancher made of leather and dust, but as a man with a heart full of graves. The cottonwood out back. A child that never lived. The wife that never saw another spring, the fever season that left 2 children orphaned. Harlan carried lost the way other men carried guns, always close, always ready. Tears rose in Leora's eyes, and she wiped them hard with her sleeve. She refused to crumble now, not in front of him, not when he needed her steady. "You said you wouldn't hand me over," she whispered. "I won't," Harlan said. "And you said you wouldn't break me," she added. His jaw clenched and his eyes looked almost pained. "I'll do my best," he said. Outside, a sound rose from the dark, not loud but clear. A knock on the door, slow and certain. 1, then 2, then 3, like a man tapping on a coffin lid. Leora flinched. Harlan lifted his hand, palm down, telling her to stay still. He moved to the door and spoke through it without opening. "Ranch is closed," he said. "Right on," a voice answered, smooth as oil. "Evenin', rancher. We're just passing through, looking for a woman." "We heard she might have come this way." Harlan's voice stayed calm. "No woman here but Mabel," the man outside chuckled softly. "Funny, you sound like a man protecting something." Leora's stomach churned. She could hear another horse shift, hear leather creak. The air felt tight, as if the whole house was holding breath. Harlan's hand tightened on the doorframe. "You're trespassing," he said. "Last warning." A pause, then the same voice, quieter now. "Caldron don't like being told no," the man said. "He don't like being made a fool. He says you got something that belongs to him." Leora's nails dug into her palms. Belongs. That word again. As if she were a horse, a tool, a debt to be collected. Harlan's voice dropped into a low, dangerous steadiness. "He don't own people," he said. The man outside sighed, like someone tired of manners. "Then come out and talk like a man," he said. "Oh, we'll come in and talk anyway." Leora's breath shook. She looked toward the back room, imagining the children's wide eyes, their small hands clinging to Mabel. She imagined them hearing every word. She imagined their fear turning into something that stayed with them for life. Harlan turned his head slightly, not looking back fully, but speaking to Leora as if the darkness could not hear. "If I open this door," he whispered, "you do what we planned. You take that pouch. You go to Mabel. You do not hesitate." Leora rose from her chair, trembling. "And you?" she whispered. Harlan's eyes met hers, and in them she saw the fragile possibility she had felt since arriving. A cowboy romance that was not soft and easy, but stubborn and earned. A Wild West love story that might survive if they chose courage over fear. His hand lifted, and this time he touched her cheek, brief and reverent as if he were memorizing her. "I'll find you," he whispered. The words sounded like a promise and a prayer. The knock came again, harder now, rattling the door. The man outside laughed once, low and confident. Harlan drew in a slow breath, then slid the bolt. The sound of it echoed through the house like thunder. Leora backed toward the hall, her heart tearing in two directions, toward the children and toward him. Harlan's fingers closed around the latch. For a heartbeat, the whole world narrowed to the door and what waited beyond it. Then Harlan pulled it open. Harlan opened the door and stepped onto the porch as if he were stepping into a different life. The night air hit him hard, cold and dry, carrying the sharp scent of horse sweat and dust. Two riders sat in the yard where the moonlight thinned, their faces half hidden by hats. A third shape lingered farther back near the fence line, watching without moving, like a man who wanted no part of the first words but planned to enjoy the last. Leora stood in the shadowed hall, the pouch of coins clenched in her fist, her breath trapped in her chest. Mabel and the children waited in the back room, silent as prayer. Every sound felt too loud. The creak of porch boards, the faint jingle of tack, the small stirring of a horse's hoof in dry earth. The West held its breath. "Evenin'," the smooth-voiced man said again, as if they were neighbors meeting at a store counter. "We can do this easy, rancher. Just hand her over and we are gone." Harlan's hands stayed visible. He did not lift the gun. He did not shout. His voice came low and steady, the same voice that had told Leora she was safe. "You rode onto my land with threats," he said. "That ain't easy." "That's foolish," the man laughed softly. "Foolish is standing between Caldron and what he says is his." Harlan's jaw tightened. "Caldron's words don't reach this far," he said. "Not unless men like you carry them." The riders shifted. The one on the left leaned forward in his saddle, impatient. "We ain't here to debate," he said. "We're here for the widow. You know what kind of debt she's got?" The word widow sliced through Leora, not for its truth, but for how they used it like a brand that made her less than a person. She pressed her back to the wall, fighting the urge to run out and scream that she did not belong to any man. She remembered Mabel's warning. Running made wolves chase harder. Harlan took a single step down from the porch, not toward them, but to place himself between the door and the yard. "You want to talk debt?" he said. "Go to town and talk it with the law. If there's any lawful paper, let it be read in daylight." The smooth-voiced man's smile thinned. "Law's asleep," he said. "And paper can be written any way a man with money wants." Harlan's eyes narrowed. "That's the truth of it," he said. "And that's why you came at night, because you know it." A sound came from the dark beyond the fence, not a horse, not a coyote. A single clear call like an owl, then another, answered from farther off. The riders stiffened. Harlan did not turn his head, but the edge of his mouth twitched, as if he had been listening for that sound since sundown. The smooth-voiced man heard it too. His gaze swept the field. "What's that?" he muttered. Harlan kept his voice calm. "Neighbors," he said. "Folks who don't like strangers prowling on another man's land." From the right side of the yard, shapes appeared in the moonlight, not rushing, not loud, but steady. 3 riders, then 2 more behind, moving like men who knew the way in the dark. One carried a lantern held low, its light dimmed with cloth. The lead rider pulled up near the gate, and in that small glow Leora saw a face she did not know. Weathered and firm, and another beside him wearing a simple scarf at the neck like a sign of a nearby camp. Mabel's voice drifted from the back room, soft as breath. "I told you," she murmured, and Leora realized Mabel had not only watched. She had sent word quietly, like a woman who had lived long enough to prepare for storms before the clouds arrived. The smooth-voiced man cursed under his breath. "You called folks," he snapped at Harlan. "I didn't have to," Harlan said. "You announced yourselves." The neighbor rider lifted his chin. "Evenin'," he called, voice carrying easy across the yard. "We saw riders where they ain't welcome. Thought we'd check." The men from Caldron hesitated. Their confidence had been built on isolation, on a ranch standing alone against the dark. Now the night held more eyes than they expected. The smooth-voiced man tried to recover his smile. "We're just passing," he said. "Looking for a woman who owes money. No harm meant." The neighbor rider's voice stayed polite, but it turned cold beneath the words. "Ain't your business," he said. "And it sure ain't your place to collect on private matters with threats." Another rider edged forward, the one with the scarf. He spoke quietly, but his voice carried a steadiness that made the yard feel smaller. "We do not trade women," he said. "Not on these plains? Not on any trail?" Leora's throat tightened. She thought of the elder woman who had given her the token. She thought of the way that woman's eyes had held no fear, only truth. The West was harsh, but it still had lines some people would not cross. The riders from Caldron shifted again. The impatient one glanced over his shoulder toward the third man near the fence. "This ain't worth it," he hissed. The smooth-voiced man's pride flared. "Caldron will pay for this," he said louder now, as if anger could bring the advantage back. "He'll hear about it." Harlan took another step down, boots firm in the dirt. "Let him hear," he said. "And let him hear more. Let him hear that I know what he's been doing in town. Let him hear that if he sends riders again, we'll ride in daylight, not to threaten, but to speak where witnesses stand." The neighbor rider nodded. "Sheriff ain't asleep when a crowd comes calling," he said. "And a storekeeper with greasy hands don't scare a whole county." The smooth-voiced man's face tightened. He measured the yard, the number of riders, the fact that his easy hunt had turned into a watched path. He tipped his hat with false courtesy. "All right," he said. "You keep your widow, you keep your pride. But the West remembers, rancher." Harlan's eyes did not blink. "So do I," he said. The riders backed their horses slowly, unwilling to turn their backs too fast, then pivoted and rode out, disappearing into the grass like bad thoughts slipping away when daylight threatens. The third man near the fence followed last, his silhouette thin against the horizon. The yard stayed quiet a long moment after they were gone. Then the neighbor rider let out a breath. "You all right?" he called. Harlan nodded once. "We are," he said. His voice sounded steadier than he likely felt. Only then did Leora realize her knees were shaking. She leaned against the wall, pressing a hand to her chest, as if she could hold her heart in place. Mabel opened the back door and came into the hall, the children clinging behind her. The boy stared toward the yard, trying to be brave, trying to understand the world of men and threats. The girl's eyes were wet, but she kept her doll tight, as if it were a piece of home she could not lose. Harlan turned back toward the doorway. When he stepped inside, the lamplight caught his face, and Leora saw how close he had come to something he feared most, losing them. Losing the small family he had built from scraps. Mabel's mouth worked as if words were hard. "I sent word," she said. "I weren't waiting to see if night would be kind." Harlan nodded, gratitude plain in his eyes. "You saved us trouble," he said. The neighbor riders remained outside a moment longer, then one called through the open door. "We'll ride to town come morning," he said. "Sheriff needs to hear about Caldron sending men after a woman like she's property." "We'll speak plain," Harlan's voice carried back. "Thank you," he said. When the riders finally left, the ranch felt like it could breathe again. The wind still moved, the plains still stretched wide, but the house no longer felt alone. The West had shown its teeth, and yet it had also shown its people. Mabel guided the children back toward bed. The boy paused and looked at Harlan. "You gonna send her away?" he asked, fear bare in his face. Harlan crouched so he was level with him. "No," he said simply. "Not because she's trouble. Because she's ours to protect, same as you." The boy's eyes widened at that word ours, but something eased in his shoulders. The girl stepped forward and held out her doll toward Leora, a small offering without speech. Leora's throat tightened. She touched the doll's ragged arm gently, as if it were sacred. When the children were settled, the house quieted. Mabel went to the stove to bank the coals and then, without looking back, said, "You two talk if you need to. Sunrise comes whether hearts are ready or not." She disappeared into her room, leaving Leora and Harlan alone in the dim kitchen. The pouch of coins still sat on the table like a reminder of how close escape had been. Harlan stared at it a moment, then pushed it aside as if rejecting the idea that she had to run anymore. He looked at Leora, and his eyes were tired but clear. "I'm sorry," he said. "That you had to hear your life spoken about like a thing." Leora's voice came rough. "I thought I'd buried the shame." she said. But hearing it again, I felt small. Harlan shook his head once, slow. You ain't small, he said. You stood through it. You didn't bolt. That takes more strength than most men carry. Leora tried to laugh, but it came out soft and broken. I wanted to bolt, she admitted. I wanted to run until the plains ended. Harlan's gaze softened. I wanted to shut the world out forever, he said. After I buried my wife and that little one, I thought my heart was done. Then those children needed a roof, and I found out a man can keep breathing even when he don't want to. Leora's eyes stung. And then I came, she whispered, and brought the past on my back. Harlan stepped closer, slow enough that she could stop him if she wished. You came, he said, and you reminded me I'm still living, not just surviving. That's a hard truth for a man like me. Leora's breath shook. What happens now? She asked. Morning, Harlan said. Then town. Then words spoken where folks can't hide behind night. He paused, then added, Caldron might snarl, but he'll think twice when he sees a line of witnesses. And if he doesn't, Leora whispered. Harlan's eyes held hers. Then we stand again, he said. Together, not as debt and collector, not as widow and prey. As people, the room felt warm despite the cold outside. Leora realized she was still trembling, but now it was not only fear. It was the aftershaking of a life turning at last toward something kinder. Harlan lifted his hand, and this time he did not stop at her cheek. He took her fingers gently, as if he were learning how to hold something precious without crushing it. You said you wouldn't trust quick, he murmured. I still won't, Leora replied, tears slipping free despite her pride. That's all right, Harlan said. I ain't asking for quick. I'm asking for true, Leora nodded, and in that small motion she felt something settle inside her, like a stone finding its place in a riverbed. The West was still harsh. The land would still test them. There would be more fences to mend, more winters to endure, more nights when the wind sounded like warnings. But there would also be mornings, and coffee on the stove, and children's laughter that did not vanish at the sight of a stranger. Later, when she lay in bed, she listened again to the windmill turning and the far-off call of coyotes. This time, the sounds did not feel like threats. They felt like the land speaking in its own language, telling her she had made it through another night. In the weeks that followed, Caldron's shadow shrank under daylight. The sheriff listened when neighbors spoke. Witnesses mattered. A man's reputation mattered. And even a greedy trader learned that the West could turn against him when he pushed too far. Leora did not forget the fear, but she watched it loosen its grip, day by day, as she earned her place by work and by quiet honesty. She learned the ranch's rhythms. She learned the children's ways, the boys' stubborn bravery, the girls' soft questions. She learned that Harlan's silence was not emptiness, but a deep water that held feeling beneath. And Harlan learned slowly that a home could hold joy without betraying the memory of those buried under the cottonwood. One evening, when the sun painted the open plains gold and the air smelled of clean hay, Harlan and Leora stood on the porch watching the children chase each other in the yard. The wind was gentle for once. Harlan's hand found hers, and she did not pull away. We ain't promised easy, Harlan said quietly. Leora looked out at the wide land, then back at the man beside her, and she felt the truth of it like warmth. No, she said. But we've earned this. The children laughed, and the sound rose into the sky like a blessing. The plain stretched on, still wild, still unforgiving in places, yet no longer empty. And in that simple moment, with the past behind them and the future uncertain but shared, Leora felt something she had not felt in a long time. Peace did not arrive like thunder. It came like sunrise, steady and quiet, lighting the world one small piece at a time.